During the 1970s, a new wave of filmmakers pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable on screen, exploring themes of violence, sexuality, and politics with unprecedented frankness. This period of cinematic liberation was met with a powerful backlash from censors in the United States and the UK, leading to many films being heavily cut, banned, or even prosecuted. The following is a detailed look at 15 of these controversial films, exploring the specific reasons behind their censorship battles and their lasting cultural impact.
Stanley Kubrick's dystopian masterpiece, based on Anthony Burgess's novel, follows the charismatic but psychopathic gang leader Alex DeLarge. The film's depiction of ultraviolence, a term coined by Burgess, was shockingly graphic for its time. Scenes of brutal beatings, home invasion, and sexual assault, often set to classical music, were disturbing to audiences. The film's most significant censorship battle took place in the UK. Following its release, there were reports of real-life copycat crimes which the media sensationalized. This public outcry led to intense pressure on Kubrick. In 1973, in an unprecedented move, Kubrick himself requested that Warner Brothers withdraw the film from UK distribution to prevent further controversy and to protect his family, who had received death threats. The film remained unavailable in the UK for over 20 years, only returning to screens in 2000, a year after Kubrick's Zenith. This decades-long suppression cemented its status as a forbidden classic. In the U.S., the film received an X rating from the Motion Picture Association of America, the MPAA, but was not cut. Over time, critics embraced its artistic merit, and it became a cult classic. The Library of Congress later deemed it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, recognizing its profound impact on cinema.
Sam Peckinpah's psychological thriller stars David Hoffman as a mild-mannered American mathematician who moves with his wife Amy to a remote Cornish village. The film's slow-burn tension erupts into shocking violence after Amy is brutally gang-raped in their home. The notorious rape sequence and the brutal revenge that follows made Straw Dogs one of the most controversial films of its era. While it received an X certificate for cinema release from the British Board of Film Classification in 1971, its controversy reignited decades later. In 1999, when a video release was proposed, the BBFC refused to classify it. Their examiners argued that a 4-minute rape scene appeared to endorse the idea that women secretly enjoy being raped, a dangerous and misogynistic notion. This interpretation led to the film being suppressed for home video until 2002. A new, re-edited version that clarified Amy's hatred for the assault was finally approved uncut. This delay made Straw Dogs a notorious example of a 70s film that was initially passed for theatrical release, but later banned from home media, highlighting the ever-changing standards of censorship.
Ken Russell's film is a baroque and explicit historical drama based on a real 17th century French exorcism scandal. It depicts a corrupt cardinal and a convent of nuns where religious repression and hysteria lead to a horrifying satanic orgy. The film's most notorious scene, a blasphemous rape of Christ sequence where nuns defile a crucifix, horrified censors. Warner Bros. Had already made cuts before submitting the film to the BBFC, but the board still insisted on multiple further deletions to lessen the graphic sex, violence, and blood. Even after receiving a trimmed X certificate, the film provoked widespread outrage. Many local councils in Britain refused to screen it, and moral campaigners led by Mary Whitehouse denounced it publicly. In the US, it also received an X rating, forcing additional cuts for an R-rated theatrical version. The Devils was heavily boulderized, which is a term for removing offensive material, for years. The UK video release of the 1971 cut only happened in 1997, and the most explicit missing passages remain largely unreleased in the original film. It stands as one of the most infamously censored films of the era, a grotesque and powerful satire of political and religious corruption that was deemed almost impossible to show uncensored.
Bernardo Bertolucci's erotic drama stars Marlon Brando and Maria Schneider as two strangers who embark on an intense, anonymous affair in Paris. The film's frank sexuality, particularly a notorious scene involving butter, stirred moral outrage worldwide. In the UK, the BBFC demanded a 10-second cut of the butter scene before granting an X rating in 1973. In many other countries, the film faced outright bans and legal prosecutions for obscenity. The most significant case was in Italy, where Bertolucci and the cast were convicted of obscenity, and all prints of the film were ordered destroyed. Bertolucci was even stripped of his civil rights for a time. Over time, the controversy faded, and the film is now recognized for its artistic merit and Brando's raw, vulnerable performance. However, the explicit scenes still make it a rare find on cable or broadcast television. Its censorship history reflects the intense moral panic surrounding the cinematic representation of explicit sexual acts, and its eventual acceptance shows how standards can evolve.
William Friedkin's horror classic follows two priests attempting to save a young girl possessed by a demon. While not as sexually explicit as other films on this list, its intense scenes of demonic violence, profanity, and spiritual terror deeply shocked audiences. Upon its UK release in 1974, Christian groups protested vigorously, pressuring local councils to ban the film. The film was actually banned in some towns on the grounds that it was offensive. But the controversy didn't end there. In 1988, its first home video release was blocked by the BBFC out of fear that it could be easily accessed by underage viewers. This action led to the withdrawal of all UK video copies. It was only after a successful theatrical re-release in 1998 that the BBFC relented, finally passing it uncut for video in 1999 with an 18 rating. The Exorcist endures as a film once so feared that even home viewing was restricted for years. Its box office success and cultural impact were immense, but its censorship saga remains a powerful example of how public moral panic can influence the availability of even mainstream films. This epic historical drama about the debauched Roman Emperor Caligula became infamous for its hardcore pornographic content. The film was financed by Bob Guccione, the publisher of Penthouse magazine, and was intended to be a mix of artistic film and softcore erotica. However, without director Tinto Brass's consent, Guccione inserted graphics, simulated, and real sex acts into the final cut. When Caligula reached the UK in 1980, customs agents seized the prints, and the BBFC demanded the removal of all sexually explicit material, in addition to further cuts for violence and obscenity. A heavily trimmed version was issued with an X certificate, but many local councils still refused to screen it. Its video debut in 1990 was also cut by about 50 minutes. The uncut version was virtually legally untouchable until 2008, 29 years after its premiere, when even the previously banned passages were passed with an 18 certificate. Today, the film is remembered as a wild cult classic, but its censorship history highlights the battle between art and pornography, and how changing legal standards and cultural attitudes can transform a film's perception from a dangerous provocation to camp political satire. Pierpaolo Pasolini's final film is a ferocious political allegory that remains one of the most disturbing films ever made. It transposes the Marquis de Sade's 18th century tale of libertinism to Mussolini's fascist Italy. The film graphically depicts powerful libertines kidnapping 18 teenagers and subjecting them to a cycle of torture, rape, humiliation, and murder. Salo was immediately declared obscene. The BBFC rejected it in 1976, and no certificate was granted. Its one brief screening at a London film club led to a police raid, and the film was effectively banned in Britain until 2000. In contrast, the US gave it a limited theatrical release in 1977, but in countries like Canada and Australia, it faced outright bans for decades. Salo remains a notorious example of a film considered too brutal and shocking to be shown. Its themes of power, corruption, and dehumanization of the oppressed were deemed so visceral that its censorship was viewed by many as a form of protection.
Wes Craven's low-budget horror film tells the story of two teenage girls who are kidnapped, raped, and murdered by a group of psychopaths. In a grim twist, the killers unwittingly seek refuge at the home of one of their victims, whose parents discover the crime and enact a bloody, gruesome revenge. The depiction of sexual violence and home invasion was so raw and extreme that the BBFC flatly refused to classify it in 1974. Secretary Stephen Murphy wrote that the film had no redeeming merit and, quote, no scrap of obvious artistic justification. The film was effectively banned in Britain for years, only gaining limited retrospective showings in the 1980s as Craven's reputation grew. While it was released in the US and became a cult classic, its censorship history in the UK reflects a strong moral stance against films that presented such visceral and unvarnished sexual violence.
Mir Zarchi's rape and revenge shocker follows a young writer, Jennifer Hills, who is viciously gang-raped and left for dead. She survives and meticulously hunts down each of her attackers, torturing and killing them in turn. The film's graphic assault scenes earned it infamy. It was never shown theatrically in the UK, but became one of the original video nasties, a term for films prosecuted under obscenity laws in the 1980s. After years of underground bootlegs, Zarchi submitted the film to the BBFC in 2001. The board demanded about 7 minutes of cuts, specifically removing the most eroticized shots of rape, arguing that these shots glorified the act. The censored version was allowed, but the uncut film remained banned. Today, its reputation is mixed, seen by some as an exploitation relic and by others as a feminist revenge fantasy. But at the time, it was one of the most heavily censored films due to its controversial subject matter.
Joseph Strick's adaptation of Henry Miller's notoriously explicit novel is set in Paris in the late 1960s, following an impoverished writer living a bohemian life. The novel had been a test case for obscenity in the US decades earlier, and the film was equally frank in its sexual content. In the US, it was rated X in 1970. However, in the UK, the BBFC refused a certificate, effectively banning it from British cinemas and videos. It was deemed too explicit to be shown at all. The unedited film was not released in the UK until many years later, reflecting the period's strict obscenity laws. By the late 1990s, when it finally became available, the film was viewed as a straightforward adult drama, rather than pornography, a testament to how shifting social standards can change a film's fate.
Tobe Hooper's low-budget horror film follows a group of teenagers who fall prey to a murderous, cannibalistic family in rural Texas, led by the chainsaw-wielding Leatherface.
Although the film contains very little on-screen blood, its grainy, realistic style and atmosphere of relentless terror caused widespread panic. The film famously became a video nasty in the UK in the 1980s. It was added to a list of films that were illegal to sell or possess on video. The Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, deemed it obscene, and the film could not be sold on tape in Britain until 1999. In an ironic twist, the film was never officially banned for theatrical release. It played in UK cinemas in the 1970s. Its early censorship only enhanced its legend as one of the most forbidden horror films of its time.
John Waters' cult classic is a black comedy about two eccentric families battling for the title of the filthiest person alive. The film is filled with outrageous and disgusting stunts, but is most famous for one scene where drag queen Divine eats actual dog feces on camera. In Britain, Pink Flamingos was never formally banned, but it was reviled by censors. When first submitted for video in 1989, the BBFC demanded massive cuts, removing not just the infamous scatological scene, but also scenes of violence against animals and other explicit acts. Only a heavily sanitized version was allowed on UK video. John Waters' film would be resubmitted multiple times, with more and more of the transgressive moments grudgingly accepted. It wasn't until 2008, 36 years after its making, that the film was finally passed uncut with an 18 rating. It remains a symbol of transgressive cinema that challenged and ultimately outlasted censorship.
This low-budget pornographic comedy became a cultural phenomenon in the U.S., grossing an estimated $600 million and bringing the adult film industry into the mainstream. It centers on a woman who can only achieve an orgasm through fellatio. The film's mainstream success, however, also brought legal trouble. Several U.S. jurisdictions declared it obscene, leading to city-level bans. The film became a central battleground in legal debates over the definition of obscenity. The U.S. Supreme Court eventually narrowed the scope of obscenity law, but Deep Throat remained a rallying point for moral crusaders. In the UK, explicit porn was largely unavailable theatrically at the time, so the film had no certified release and circulated only underground. Its legacy is as the 70s most famous adult film, whose censorship battles helped define the legal boundaries of on-screen sex for decades to come.
This Monty Python satire follows Brian, a young Jewish man who is mistakenly identified as the Messiah in ancient Judea. Its irreverent comedy took aim at religious dogma, provoking accusations of blasphemy from religious groups. While the BBFC gave it a relatively mild AA rating, local councils in the UK had the power to override this decision. In a famous case of local censorship, 11 British councils outright banned the film from their cinemas, and 28 more raised the minimum age as a protest. Despite this, the film went on to become a huge box office hit and is now hailed as a comedic genius. The controversy surrounding Life of Brian demonstrates how political and religious satire in cinema can be a potent catalyst for local censorship battles, even when a film is not particularly graphic or violent. Volker Schlorndor's film, based on the Günter Grass novel, tells of a boy named Oscar who decides to stop growing at age 3 to avoid the adult world, set against the backdrop of the rise of Nazism. The film was internationally acclaimed, winning the Palme d'Or and the Oscar for Best Foreign Film. Despite its critical success, it became the subject of a bizarre censorship case in the U.S. In 1997, a county judge in Oklahoma deemed a controversial scene where a prepubescent Oscar undresses a pregnant woman to be illegal under U.S. child pornography laws.
The judge banned the film entirely in Oklahoma County, and copies were seized from video stores and libraries. The decision was later overturned on appeal, but the ban drew international attention. The Oklahoma case remains a landmark example of how a legally and critically acclaimed film can be caught up in a local obscenity ruling and become a symbol of censorship.